Welcome, everyone, to this wonderful Saturday. Thanks for you guys taking time out of your day to sit with me on a Saturday afternoon. I saw the registration, and it seems that there's some people from different parts of the world. So we're gonna try and get into this rather quickly to make the best use of your time. So to kind of explain a little bit more what we'll be doing today, the title was Advanced Concrete Modeling. We got three goals that we want to accomplish today. So for those of you taking notes, so the first goal is going to be how we can create an accurate concrete model efficiently for quantitative purposes, and how that model can then be used for 2D drawings. The second goal is we're going to be using Revit out of the box with no add-ins. Today, there's so many keywords out there with Dynamo and scripting and graphs. We want to work just in the Revit user interface and just show how much information we can pack into a model. And then the third goal is that for those of you that are looking to implement Revit in your offices, that it doesn't have to be super complicated. You can take things in phases, okay? So before we get started, we all know that Revit is a 3D modeling program, right? That's what we know. But what many of us sometimes forget is that it's really a workflow program. Just like in our real world, we have natural laws to abide by, like gravity, right? That law is broken all the time when people hop in planes. However, in old days, if you didn't follow that law, you'd get hurt. Well, same thing in Revit. You are the creator of this world, but there are some natural laws. And if you understand that this is a workflow program, you start thinking about what things should be in place before I begin modeling. All right, so the trick to any modeling in Revit efficiently is well-built families. And that's what we're going to get into today. When you think about families, you have to think about more than just accomplishing something in 3D. That family needs to help you on the 2D drafting side, and it'll help you for the 4 and 5D side. So what we'll cover today is packaging a model for the future. 4D being 3D plus time, 5D, 3D plus time and cost. So let's go ahead and get our workstation set up. Let's get our user interface set up. For those of you that got Revit open, all I did was do a file new project, and I navigated using my browse button. I navigated to the structural analysis. So if we go in here under templates, this is the template that I'm using to get started. All right. So first things first is I'm a keyboard person. So let's go ahead and set up our keyboard shortcuts. So let's go to File, Options, User Interface, Keyboard Shortcuts. First one we're going to set up is column. So just type in column, make sure it says CL. The next one is isolated footing, IF. Then we got floor. Floor I am setting up with FF. Next is beam, BM. I like to use hide category a lot, HC. Then we got array, AR. This one is nice as well. Select all in the entire project, SA. And then grid, GR. There's some others that we'll use throughout the day. If you don't have it, then we'll slow down a little bit. I tend to go a little quick, but I'll try and slow down. Okay, so we got our keyboard shortcuts set up. Now let's assign our object styles. Object styles are found under Manage. Far left says Object Styles. I like assigning colors to my elements because that's how I learned. I came from AutoCAD 15 years ago, and AutoCAD is all colors. and the white background and the black lines just made me go crazy. So let's go ahead and just set some things up. Let's go with blue walls. And you guys can do whatever you want, obviously. Foundations, we'll go with magenta. Same thing with floors. That's not magenta, that's magenta. And we gotta do columns. Structural columns can go to a nice cyan, so it pops. And then framing, we can go with green. And casework's a good one. That one can go to red. All right. So I'll let you guys catch up a little bit. Okie dokie. Oh, I forgot this one. If we go back into keyboard shortcuts, the shortcut for keyboard shortcuts is KS. Let's type in default, your default 3D view. That one's a good one to have because we're going to be doing a lot of our modeling in 3D. All right, so the basic Revit workflow. Let's go to level 1 here. Let me close level 2, and let's delete some of this views that we aren't going to be needing today. Let's delete those. And the basic Revit workflow for any modeling is, first, you need your level set up. Second are your grids. Third are your walls and or columns. And after that, it can come in any order it wants. Again, remember we talked about Revit being a workflow program. So we're gonna play on those workflows and try to understand why. All right, so let's type in 3D on your keyboards. And now let's hit level 1 and window tile. A shortcut for that is WT. I did a zoom extents here, that is ZE. Now let me click over here and do ZE. So here are my levels. Let's just change this thing up to 15 feet just to give us some space, okay? And now over here in plan view, you know, since we're primarily gonna be working on foundations today, let's go ahead and start adding our grids, okay? Before you add your grids, it's a good practice to know where you want to place the grid. I like using the internal points that Revit has. So if we go to our visibility graphics, shortcut for that is VG, okay? Or for those of you that are still learning, if you come over into the view properties of your plan view, it's also right here. So hit edit. Now let's look for site, which will turn on. But as we drill in, let's turn on internal origin. If you're working on a later version of Revit, project base point works just as well. So let's hit OK. So you can see that right out of the box, the template, the structural template doesn't seem to, you know, that point isn't centered on the elevations or anything. It just feels kind of random. So let's put our lower left grid intersection at that point. All right, that's a good practice to develop. So we're just going to keep it simple with our grids. So GR on your keyboard for grid. Let me start here and just go up. And now we can just get rid of these elevations. So select one elevation and then type in SA for select all, and let's just delete them. All right, now let's pull this guy over here and let's extend it past. Let's make it a little longer here. Now on your keyboard, use the array tool, which is AR, or you can go here, array. So array, I'm gonna click anywhere. Actually, let's go through our options on here. Let's not group and associate. We'll create 5 grids at 20 feet each, okay? Same thing the other way. Let's create a grid. Change this to A. And now let's array this guy. Do not group and associate. We need 5 grids at 20 feet. I know we're getting basic here, but after the basic setup of the modeling, then we'll start getting into some good stuff. All right, so let's make these grids a little bit more organized. I like getting organized with my grids because I think of this quite literally. So let's move. What I did there is I selected one grid. I hit select all on my keyboard. And then I hit move, MV. and I hovered over the bottom left intersection, and I just physically moved it to that point, okay? I try to get very organized with my grid and level situation. I think of this as an actual site in real life. If you are a superintendent or a foreman and people are visiting your site, maybe the owner is visiting your site, and you have a messy site, it just doesn't, it's not a good look. Same thing with my grids and levels, and if I have elements floating, if I'm sharing that model, I want that thing to look nice and tidy because it makes it easier and it's a good look on me and the company I work for. It's pride, okay? So that's a good habit to get into. So now that we have located our grid system at the origin, let's go ahead and turn off the site category. So visibility graphics, find site and just turn it off. And there we go. So in our basic Revit workflow, we talked about levels needed to be setting up first. We have the default levels. We create our grid system. Now we can go ahead and create walls. So let's go to structure, drop down, structural wall. My shortcut is WA for that, so let's click there. If you're using your mouse, I like the workflow that the mouse has to go through. So if I go structure, wall, the next automatic place that the mouse goes to is this options bar. So I'm at level 1, height. I want to go up to level 2, and I want to do finish face exterior. These location lines only make sense if you are modeling in a clockwise fashion. So if I say finish face exterior, and I start here, but I go this way, you see how where I have my line, that's not really finish face exterior, that's finish face interior. However, I'm modeling in a counterclockwise. So if I model clockwise, now my location line makes sense. That is finish face exterior, okay? So we're gonna go up, click here, and come over and click there. All right, now if we click once in our 3D, we see that we have some walls modeled. Our levels look a little weird. So what we're gonna do is select a level, actually select both of them, right click on it and hit maximize 3D extents. That makes sure that the level is passing through all of that, okay? So now that we have model elements, we can start to depend on our 3D model more. So let's go ahead and hide these levels. Select one, and on your keyboard type in HC for hide category, or you can select one, right click, hide in view by category, same thing. Okay, zoom extents. So now this looks a little weird, so let's play around with our view control bar here. So let's assign maybe a consistent color. You see this thing in the middle, this line in the middle, that's in an analytical category. So let's go to our visibility graphics and let's turn off analytical model categories, all of them. We don't really need that for this case right here. All right, so now we have the beginnings of our wall. So now back to plan. Now let's create our columns. CL for column. On your options bar, make sure that we are going up in space to level 2. But before you start clicking, look at your options here. We got at grids. So let's click at grids, okay? And now all you do is select the grids where you want a column. So drag your cursor over. You got a preview, and I selected the wrong column, but we'll change that after, and hit finish. Let's escape twice. Now in my 3D, I can change these columns, selecting one, selecting all, and let's change this guy to a 1824. So far, we're in basic land, right? Next, you can go any which way you want, all right? But let's work on footings, isolated footing. Shortcut for that, IF, okay? Now on your options, up here on your ribbon, you got at columns now. Remember we talked about Revit being a workflow program. So let's click at columns and select our columns. We got our preview. Let's go ahead and hit finish, and let's escape twice. Now these footings, let's make them square. So select one footing, and over here in the edit type properties, we're just going to rename this to 72 by 72. Go ahead and make this 72 inches and hit finish. All right. And now let's start adding floors here. This is going to be a slab on grade project. So in plan view, we're going to type FF for floor. Takes us into sketch mode. Here is the default for creating a floor, picking walls. So also an essential element to have before you start modeling your floors. So let's select both of these walls. The way I did that is I hovered over one and I hit tab to select the inside face. Now we're going to pick the use the pick lines tool and select the outer two grids. From here, trim, TR, trim, 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 trim. I'm going to change our floor type, and let's just use generic 12 for now. We will modify that later and hit finish. Okay. So this is where we begin refining. So let's close level 1 and let's get used to modeling and refining in our 3D view. For starters, I don't like generic stuff. So let's grab this floor and let's get more specific with it. Let's go to the edit type properties and let's rename this. Let's call it slab on grade, 5 inches. Okay. Now the structure, let's update that to 5 inches, and we'll update the material a little later. Now let's hit OK, and OK. All right, so the thickness updated. Now these perimeter walls, let's select these guys. They're also generic, so let's go into edit type. Now let's get specific. Let's call this shotcrete wall, exterior, 12 inches. The naming of walls is very, very important. You know, we're dealing with a simple little structure back here. But when you're dealing with, you know, a large podium with many different types of walls that are cast in place in shotcrete, that information is very important to know, because that tells a concrete subcontractor what he's allowed to do, how he's allowed to either shoot that wall or if he has to cast that wall, okay? So let's edit this and make this a foot. And let's hit OK. Okay, and you can see that the floor edge automatically updated and the wall got thicker by the location line that we had set in the beginning to finish face exterior. Okay, so now based on the structural drawings, right, that we have and the details that we're working off of, it says that the top of footing is at -1 foot. That's assuming that that is where the grade is, the earth is, right? So let's select all of our columns. So select one and hit SA. And in the properties, let's do -1 foot. Now, don't ignore warnings or just simple statements like this. Revit is communicating with you, so let it talk, don't ignore. It's letting you know that, hey, a foundation you placed here is going to move down. Well, that's what we want in this case. Let's say yes. And to make our viewing more enjoyable here, let's assign a transparency to this floor. So let's go to visibility graphics, find floors, and on the transparency column, let's just assign, 25 or whatever you guys want, just so we can see through. If we zoom in, you can see how Revit functions in its own natural laws. Revit considers floors more important than columns, so it automatically slices through those columns. That is something to take note, because we know that in real life, this floor is the last thing to be poured. at this level. So in fact, this floor is going to pour around that column, okay? But one thing to note is if we update this join, this is called the join, if we update that and then have to go in to the sketch, that might change the joins again. So it's good to leave joins as your last option. Remember, we're talking workflows, right? So let's add, one thing that I want to add in here is a little arc on this floor. So do not go to level 1. All right, let's make it here. Let's double click in here, double click on the floor, and on your drawing tools up here, let's select this guy right here. Start and radius arc. Click anywhere, and just add an arc to this. Okay. Let's split lines. So on your contextual tab up here, under the modify panel, you got that little guy, split element. And let's select this line and now use our trim for trimming everything back. Escape and finish. So we got a little arc there, okay? Let you guys catch up. All right, so our columns are down minus a foot. Now let's do the same thing with our walls. Select your walls. Again, the way I did that is I hovered, tab, click. Another important thing that that will help some of you guys, this little drop down right there. It allows you to select elements by face. Right now, if I uncheck that and come back, it doesn't allow me to select the wall. I have to hover over a corner to select it. I prefer to select elements by face. It's quicker for me personally. So just in case some of you were wondering, that's the option that I'm using right now. Okay, so there you go. So hover, tab, click in the properties, this one. All right, so far, so good. These columns got to shift a little bit. We're gonna, if we look on plan, they are centered on grids, but because it's the exterior part of this building, we're gonna align these columns to the face of the floor. But let's do that in 3D. Let's not do that in plan, all right? We're talking about a more advanced approach to modeling. So on your keyboard, type in AL, zoom in until you get to the face of a floor, hover, select. Your first selection is your destination, okay? And now on your options, check multiple alignment. And now select the faces of each of these columns. Probably should have added the footings after. Now let's do the same thing over here. Face, 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 face. Okay. And now if you want to align these on plan, that's fine. If you want to delete and add new ones, that's fine. I'll do that on plan. Align. And now these. All right. So now let's do that wall footing. Traditional Revit structure has you use the foundation slab tool or the wall foundation tool. Now, the wall foundation tool can be great. If I select wall foundation and click on a wall, it automatically creates a wall foundation for me. However, the issue with wall foundations currently is that although you have all these options in here, it doesn't allow me the opportunity to embed something in it. You know, when you talk about creating families and that families are the backbone of efficient modeling, this tool is a system family. I can't save a system family out to a server. Remember, without an add-in, we're talking about using Rabbet without add-ins, and I can't edit this family. I can't open it and add things to it. So let's forget it. Let's not use wall foundation. Let's create our own family. So here's our first family creation. So let's go to File, new family. And let's look for structural framing template, RFT, Revit family template. Let it open. Now, this is the default that the Autodesk gives you. It's to tackle different framing elements for different materials. But since we're dealing with liquid concrete, right, cast in place concrete, we don't need all of these other symbols. So let's delete these other reference planes. Let's delete this guy in here. And before we actually get started, we can never forget to come over here to these properties and up here under material for model behavior, you have to select something here or else you run the risk of volumes being incorrect. So let's hit this drop down and hit concrete. Okay. Now let's hover over. Before we begin creating geometry for this continuous footing for the wall, we got to create the skeleton of the family, which are reference planes. Reference planes are number one in family building. Okay. So let's go to create reference plane. And I like using the pick lines tool. So pick lines and let's set an offset of 2 feet. And let's hover down here and hover up here. Now we got to go to one of these elevations, either this side or this side. So let's click on right. There we go. There's right elevation. So same thing, create a reference plane, picking lines, this time 2 feet. And let's hover down. Let's go ahead and extend these reference planes down. And when it comes to creating reference planes, you don't have to follow this order of creating these planes here in plan view first versus elevation. The goal is creating reference planes before creating geometry. So for any line-based tool, I prefer using sweeps. So if we go to create sweep, sweeps allows you to create a path of travel and then assigning a profile that is attached to that path. So under sketch path, I'm going to pick lines. This little checkbox right here can make or break you. Whenever you're building a family, lines have to be locked to reference planes or else they do not update the way you expect them to. So let's go ahead and pick our path. That guy, he's locked. But to lock these endpoints, there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can hover over the endpoint, drag it off and on the reference plane, and on your keyboard, hit shift. Let go of the mouse. Now you get another lock button here, lock. Another way of doing the same thing is hitting align, AL, selecting your destination, selecting the point, lock. Everything needs to be locked. So let's hit finish. We're finished with the path. Now we have to create a profile. So to edit that profile, that is vertical, right? I have to go to an elevation to edit. So let's go to right elevation. And there's the profile right there. I'm going to select it and hit edit profile. Now we're in sketch mode. So let's hit pick lines. Again, our lock checkbox is good. And now let's select our reference planes and the level. Everything's nicely locked. Use your trim to bring it together. Okay. And now we'll hit finish. And finish again. So if you type in 3D on your keyboard, now we can see, you know, a preview of our beam. Now, just to set this up so that we don't have to come back and assign something to it, let's go ahead and select this element that we have here. And under material, we got nothing, right? So let's go to assign, and let's just click on structural material. Because we chose the structural framing family template, this parameter is already preset and preloaded in here. So we are assigning material. We are saying that this is a structural material that we can then modify in our project. So let's load into the project and close. We don't want to save this family yet, just in case we want to make some changes to it. We want to refine it before saving it out into a file server. So we'll say no. Okay. Now we're going to do this in 3D. You can either go to Structure, Beam, and activate Family 7 and the rest of your beams, or you can go to Families, Structural Framing, drill down, and drag and drop this. It still activates the beam tool for you. Okay, I've gotten into the habit of dragging and dropping just because I like knowing that everything is just here on my left, on my project browser on the left. Okay, so because we already have walls in place, the walls have already been set down to -1 foot. I'm going to use pick existing lines. We already have some edges that we can use. So let's orbit around. To orbit, press Shift on your keyboard, hold your scroll button. Okay, and let's just pick one of these edges. I want that one, and I want that one. Okay, so far so good. I understand it's not centered, but there's a couple of ways of moving that to the center. You can go to Plan and use your Align tool, which is not bad, or you can take half of this thickness, which is 12 inches, right? So you can take 6 inches, and you can play with these offset values. I like keeping things simple, so let's go to level 1 and using our Align tool, AL, AL, and there you go. All right. So I'm going to change this background to black. Let's go to File, Options, Graphics. Remember I mentioned I came from AutoCAD, so this gives me less headaches. So let's extend these footings to meet the exterior face of these footings. But let's do it here. So in our Modify tab, let's look for our Modify tools, and then let's look for this little guy, Trim Single Element. You select your destination first, so the face of this footing and that guy. Same thing on the other side, face of this footing and that guy. So far, we're still relatively basic. We're not really getting into the 4D stuff yet and including every little piece of concrete. That is next. So we need to, if we look at this kind of view like this, let's hit front here. When they go to pour this slab, they will usually pour a little bit of slab here to cover, you know, this exposed area of the footing. Same thing with these footings over here. We're focusing more on here because we know that foundations go first, then these vertical elements go second, and then this with the thickened slab will go third. So let's create that thickened slab. We already know that the beam tool worked rather well when placing a line-based element. So let's do the same thing with the thickening family, okay? So at this point, we can start renaming some of these things. So the name of this family will go with the dimensions, which we don't have. So let's add those actually before we forget. Let's go to Edit Family, Reference Level, okay? And let's extend these families over. I'm going to place a dimension, DI, place. And now I need to place a dimension to keep this thing centered. So place. Make sure it says equal, just like that. Now this is going to be set to width. So select this little button right here, call it width. We leave it as a type parameter and we'll leave it under dimensions. Now we're going to go to our right elevation and add depth. So DI, and let's change this guy to depth. right. So this is set. Now we can load into project and close. No, because we're going to rename it in the project. Overwrite. Now we can grab this footing, edit the type, and there's our dimensions. So let's rename this guy. The family name we'll call continuous footing. This one can be the physical dimension. So 48 by 24. Or whatever your company calls these footings. So to rename the family, now I'll just right click here, rename continuous footing. After you feel comfortable with the family, it has all the functionality you want. From here, you right click and save it out. You can see that I've already created my own family library. But you can see that this is very different from how Revit automatically or Autodesk categorizes and creates its families. It creates them by category. I try to create them by what I'm trying to build, because I might use a structural framing category to help me with foundations. You know, so that type of library doesn't work for me, especially when it comes time to train. It no longer works. So you can save this out to a custom family library that you have preset. All right, let's create another family for that thickening. Now we can get going. File, new, family. Same deal, structural framing, beams and braces, and hit open. We delete what we don't need because we're dealing with liquid concrete, so delete. And set this guy to concrete. Create your reference planes. So the shortcut for reference plane is RP. RP. Now I'm going to hit pick lines. Let's just go off a 1.6 up. Now let's go to our right elevation and create our depth. RP. Pick lines. Let's go a foot down. Okay, so far so good. Let's place our dimensions here. Let's name them. So on thickenings, because we want a thickening family for the entire project, and we want different thickenings that have different widths and depths, this is where we set this parameter to be an instance parameter. Okay, so which one did I select? This is width. And this guy is depth. Instance, depth. Okay. So let's go back to our plan view. Remember, I'm a fan of sweeps. So create a sweep. Sketch a path. I'm picking an existing line, and I'm going to lock it. And I'm going to select that. I'll wait for a couple to catch up. So now we're going to go to our right elevation, because a sweep has two parts to it. First, you sketch the path that this family is going to exist on, but then you need to sketch the profile. Like, what does this thing look like? So let's hit finish the sketch, but we're still in create a sweep mode. So let me go to my right elevation and click on the profile. And now up here, I get the option to edit that profile. Okay, so now we're back in sketch mode again. Let's hit pick lines. Let's lock the line. Pick the reference plane. This guy, lower reference plane. Okay. Now let's trim these three together. Now we want this to go off at a 45, okay? If we kind of pull up some details here, let's just go to our desktop and let's look at some structural details. You know, we're trying, I see three elements here, okay? So if we kind of look at this a little bit, we already modeled, you know, this floor. But to model this, We could use the slab edge tool within Revit, but we're thinking about the sequence of things. This part right here is going to be poured with the slab above. So there's actually 3 families that live here, and we are focusing on this guy. So let's go back into Revit, and let's draw a line, this corner, at a 45-degree angle, and trim everything together. Okay. And let's hit finish. You finish the profile here. You're still in the sweep mode. And now let's hit finish again. Now let's test the family here. So let me pull this off to the right a little bit. Now on the top left-hand corner, you got an option for family types. So in there, the length is going to be defined in your project. So let's just move this guy down a little bit, and let's move width up. But now let's type in a different value in here and hit apply and see if it locked. It didn't. So what didn't I do? Remember that option for aligning a point? So let's go back and put this at 1'6" and say, okay. Now let's go into this profile. So this is first the sweep, edit the sweep. Now I hover and I click on the profile, edit the profile. Now I'm going to select align on my keyboard, select the reference plane and the point, and hit lock. Escape twice. So hopefully that worked. Let's hit finish, finish again. Let's go to our family types, and let's assign this to 2 and hit apply. Okay, so the width is working, and let's check the depth. And the depth is working. But it looks like my angle didn't stay. So let's go ahead and add the angle in there. Undo, double click. Let's place a 45-degree angle, DI. Up here, choose angular, reference plane first, sketch line second, click to place, lock. Now let's finish once, finish twice, family types, and now let's play with the depth. Let's go 2 feet, let's exaggerate, and it stayed at 45 degrees. So let's assign a default. You know, whenever a new user uses this family, we want some default dimensions in here. So typical numbers, 1'6" by 1. And let's hit okay. And now let's load this one into the family, into the project. Load in a project and close. We're not going to save this out yet, right? We want to do some more finessing. So let's say no. All right. Now let's go to your 3D view. So type in 3D on your keyboard. And let's close level 1. Don't need it yet. Now I'm going to type in beam, just to show you a different way of activating the beam tool. BM. I'm default in family 8. And let me hit pick lines. And now we're going to hover over the top edge of this floor and the top edge of this floor. You see that it's starting to come together. This family is going to be poured with this family when they come and pour all this together. All right. And you can see the power of using beams for foundations, because the beam tool, you got all these arcs and options for it, and this 3D snapping saves you a lot of time as opposed to modeling in a 2D view like a level 1, okay? And aside from that, this is also good training to see a visual of what's actually happening, okay? So we're still active. Let's keep using this thickening family now to reinforce or create this edge, okay? Because remember, if we go to the image here, now we're creating this edge, right? So let's right click on that beam and hit create similar. What that tool does, it inherits all of the dimensions of that thickening and it uses it moving forward. So now let me hit pick lines here and let's select this edge and let's select this edge. But I'll also need this edge and this edge. Now let's use our trim, because these are line-based tools. I can use trim. So TR, trim, trim. TR is still active, so trim, trim. And let's get these guys together. All right. We will address that later. So now we can go forward and create our actual grade beam here. We already have a continuous footing family that we're using. So let's go into edit type, duplicate this type, and let's call it 18 inches by 24. So I should have organized these better so width can go on top, but width is 18 inches by 24 is already set. Let's hit OK. Let's change that guy back, 48. So we created the footing, but now we're going to do right here, 18 by 24, drag and drop, pick lines, and now let's pick this edge. Let's pick this edge, and we can trim this edge over and this edge. So let's cut a section through here so we get an idea of what this thing is starting to look like. And just for variety, let's go to level 1. We are down here. Let's create a section through here. That doesn't really match my image, right? So we know that we need to align this guy to this guy. So let's go back to 3D. So type in 3D, use your align tool, AL, and let's select that destination. This guy's moving. Same thing here. Let's select this destination. This guy's moving, and this guy's moving. Since this one is difficult to align, right? This is where it's nice to use this geometric position. So you see origin and top, you know, it wants to go, that top is the top center of this beam. So we can play with the Y now. So let's do left. All right, that didn't work. Let's do right. There you go. So now we have that turning under. Okay. Let's make these footings. Let's see here. So the reason why I'm not going to simply trim everything together is because when it comes to these footings, at least for us, when we work in concrete and we're taking quantities, we like to know the information specific to this footing, right? It was okay to extend this one and make this one element because this is filler. That family is filler, right? But when it comes to beams, you know, we want more accurate information. So I'll use trim to extend the beam all the way to the corner, but then I'm going to split it and create separate segments, okay? Remember, we are thinking about 4 and 5D, right? And trying to implement that as a standard. That is bridging the gap between design and construction and making this information truly usable. So let's just trim these things together. Trim, and let's trim these guys, right? And that guy, we'll deal with him a little later. So it's going under. Let's use now our split element, right? And let's split it just along here. We'll then trim them back. So let's split, split, and split. Now use trim single and select your destination first. Okay. And you don't have to orbit like that. You can hover over that edge until it highlights. You see that? tab is your friend. So right here, if you don't get that, you can hover over and tab. All right. Let's split this guy as well. Trim, single. Trim that guy back, extend that guy over. So far, so good. Just because this is kind of driving me crazy, let's make this 2 feet. It's 18 inches right now. Let's hit edit type. Let's make these 2 feet. And let's rename them to 24. Okay. All right. Now let's try and tackle how to put a thickening over this footing. And now we're thinking about a workflow, right? So if I select this footing, you know, we have a gap in there. So it's, okay, how do we want to model that? Well, everything else is structural framing. So, okay, let's keep it organized. Let's keep this new family as structural framing. But we think about how we're going to model it. So that's another important step to building families is how complicated do you want it to be, but how simple does it need to be to model? Do you really want to select all of these footings? Select all. Isolate the element under these glasses down here. Let's hit isolate element. Do you really want to place an element over this? Click, 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 click. No, right? It doesn't really work too well. So let's try and see if we can use a column to place that for us, because more often than not, these footings are centered on that column. So let's create a new family. File, new, family. And don't forget to go ahead to structural framing. But remember that this is a beam. So the default of this template has 2 endpoints to it. We need something that's just going to place in place, you know? So let's do a little different approach, and let's go up to generic model and hit open. And here, the generic model family is bare bones. You know, they should have at least included some reference planes here with some dimensions preset. We know that this thickening family is going to be pretty much square, okay? So let's create more reference planes. So RP for reference plane, let's hit pick lines. And on this offset on your options bar, let's hit 2 feet. And we're going to offset one on each one, okay? And don't forget to do the one in elevation view. So let's go to right, and let's place another reference plane, pick lines, and let's not forget to go 6 inches up. We want the base of this thickening to be at the bottom of the structural column, correct? Because the bottom of the structural column equals the top of footing. But we're going to use the column to place this element. So let's go to plan view now. And this is going to be 2 families, two different types of geometries. One's going to be a simple rectangle, and the other is going to be a sweep around it to create that 45-degree that we did with the thickening, the original thickening family. So let's go to create extrusion this time. Pick lines. Do not forget the lock button. And let's select these at the corners. Trim together. And finish the sketch. So this extrusion is locked in XY. If I try to pull it off, it gives me an error. No, it's like, no, you're locked. Remove? No. So we got to go to elevation to lock the other faces, see? So if I pull this one down and pull it up, I get the lock. I pull this down, I get the lock. All right. Don't forget dimensions, DI. Let's change this dimension to be depth. And do not forget to choose instance. Remember, these thickening families, these are just filler. We're just using them for volume, that's it. So they don't need to have different types like a beam needs to, all right? So now on plan, let's put some dimensions down. This equals ensures that this element stays centered on your point, on your insertion point. Same thing here. And now let's add overall dimensions. So this one will be width, this one will be length. So let's create new ones. This one will be length. Okay, so far so good. On your keyboard, type in 3D. Let's just look at this in a 3D view. Okay, so we have our basic rectangle. Now we need to add the sweep that goes around here at a 45 degree. So reference level, floor plan, create a sweep, and let's hit sketch a path, pick lines, and the lock should be already active because we've been using it. And let's lock. Whenever you're creating a sweep with the profile attached, the first line you select is where the profile will be hosted, okay? So if I'm used to working in my right elevation to modify that profile, the way I have my line selected right now, it's gonna be super confusing. So I'm gonna open that right elevation, I'm not gonna see the profile. So if you want to reassign it, you just delete a line and re-add it back. So let's trim. And finish. Now I can go to my right elevation and I will see that profile in elevation. Right. There it is. Edit the profile, pick lines, the lock is on. You got this guy and this guy, and we don't want to forget our 45. So let's draw a line and go up. Trim everything together. Let's throw a 45 degree locked dimension here from the reference plane, not the line, reference plane to the line, and then hit lock. And just to make sure that we are good, let's hit align here, and let's select this reference plane, and there's a dot there. So let me zoom in. Here's the workflow. AL, reference plane. When you hover over, hit tab until the dot highlights. So tab, 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 click. There you go. Tab is your friend in Revit. And finish. Finish. Now let's go to 3D. So it shows me as two separate elements. We want this to be one element. So over here under geometry in your modify tab, get the join and just select both of them and they're joined. So before we test this out, remember we used a generic model family template to create this thing, okay? So let's not forget to change the category up here under family categories and parameters. So click that. Let's change it to structural framing. And we can't forget to, can I make this bigger? I cannot. To go here, material for model behavior, and we want concrete. And hit OK. So I don't know if you guys are movie people, but we're gonna do something that happens in Inception. If anyone's watched that movie, it's a dream within a dream within a dream. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put a family within a family within a project, okay? So this guy is gonna go inside of the column family because we want this to exist wherever we have a column. So the column is our driver. So let me go back to the project and let's open this column family, edit family. Once these three files are open, You see that I only have 3 tabs open. Maybe some of you have more tabs open. Go to View tab, and this guy, Close Inactive Windows. Okay, you should at that point just have 3. Once you have just those views open, hit Window Tile on your keyboard, WT, and do a zoom extents on the 2 elements that we're working with. So this thickening is going into this family that's going into this project. All right, so let's do that. Thickening, load in a project, not the project, but the family. Goes in here. Just click to place anywhere for now. You can change the graphics if you like, you know, just so you can kind of see some stuff. And let's close this guy for now, because it lives here. Let's window tile again. Now we got to go to a plan view to align this stuff. So let's go into, drill down into views, then into floor plans. Let's go in here. Now let's align it to the center. Let's lock. Let's continue our alignment and bring this down. Let's undo this multiple alignment. And let's lock. So it's centered. Now we can load this family, this column family with the thickening into the project. So let's load into project, overwrite. All right, we got some thickenings. Now, you'll probably notice that this is the beauty of colors. We assign columns to be cyan. In our family on the left, that thickening is clearly structural framing. But somehow when we load it into the project, Revit is seeing it as a column family. Oh, well, it's in the column family. Of course it's going to see it. But you don't necessarily want that to report as a column. Because let's do a quick undo on your keyboard, hit Control Z. If you select one of these columns, you already had a volume, right? A volume set. If we load the family back in, load in a project, yes, overwrite. It was 46 before, now I got 56. So that's reporting incorrect information. And this is the part where check boxes can save you. So let's go back into the family. So something is up with the thickening family. Let's open in this guy, edit. And now this family over on the right, on the properties, or on the left, wherever you got it, this checkbox right here, shared. When enabled, Revit recognizes the family separately from the host. You can select, tag, and schedule a nested family separately. That's what we want. So check that box. Load this family into the column. Overwrite. Now load the column family into the project. Overwrite. Now Revit recognizes it as a separate category. It is structural framing. And now when it comes time to schedule these things, we can be accurate with our information. So far, so good? I hope so, because you guys are all muted. So anyway, let's move forward. Let's start adding some functionality to this thickening. We don't want just this default, you know, geometry. We want to be able to modify it. And if you look close enough in your 3D of your family, let's type in 3D here. Well, I'm technically still getting incorrect reporting. If I select this family and go to the temporary hide isolate and isolate it, there's no void there for my column to punch through. We know that verticals go before this piece of concrete. So let's go ahead and add that void in the family. So select the family and hit edit. Let's go to a plan view. And let's add more reference planes that are going to represent the column that's going to fit in here. So RP for reference plane, pick lines. Let's go with 6 inches. Pick. pick. Don't forget your sets of dimensions. So BI, that's your overall, and then your equal. Same thing here, equal and overall. I know a lot of this is redundant, but these are the building blocks. You know, this is what makes or breaks you. So let's call this one, let's match the properties of the column. So if we click back in on our project and select this column and go over to edit type, you're seeing that Revit out of the box is calling it B and H. I don't like B and H, but for the purposes of this training, we will call our parameters in the thickening family B and H as well. So let's select this guy, create a new one, instance, call it B. And this one, create a new one, instance, call it H. All right, so we have our reference planes created. Now let's go to Create tab, Void Forms, Void Extrusion. Let's pick lines, and let's select these 4 and trim everything together. Okay, and finish. Again, this void is locked in XY. We have to lock it in the elevation view. So let's go to right. Let's hover in here. Hover over where it's supposed to be. Sometimes it'll select here, sometimes it won't. So if it doesn't, hit tab until it highlights. And bring it down until it snaps and locks, snaps and locks. All right, let's load into project and close. Let's go into our column. We don't want to save this yet. We want to override this, and there is our hole. Now we need these dimensions to match the column that is going through here. So let me restore this view down here, reset. And let's go to a plan view, because in that case it is easier to see. So if we hover over the thickening, there we can see it doesn't match. So all we're going to do is select this family, and in the instance properties, we're going to find H, go over to associate family parameter, and we're going to select H from the column. So hit OK. And now same thing with B, and hit OK. And to test it out, feel free to change the column size and hit apply and hit OK. And you should see that the thickening is updating. So let's pull this into the project, load in a project. It's asking you what you want to do with the thickening. So we want this middle option. Not yet, we're good. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. The column is punching through this thickening. And we can select the thickening by clicking tab on your keyboard. The first hover is the host, the column. So now hit tab on your keyboard and click on it, and that shows you this nice little number of volume, okay? So let's go ahead and switch the join of all these columns to the floors. So let's go to the Modify tab and hit Join. Let's go to Switch Join Order. And on your options bar, make sure that multiple switch is set. Click your floor first, do a crossing window, and hit Escape. And that should have changed all your columns. But it also changed my thickening, so let me do an undo. Let's do that again. Switch the join. Switch the join. Select your floor, but this time I'll do it this way. Just columns. And there we go. Now our columns are governing. The floor is going to pour around the column. Okay, let's keep going with this thickening. Again, this is redundant, but these are those things that you do once, and everyone that begins using these families will appreciate the work that was done to them because you're making their life easy. So now let's add a function for making this geometry wider, you know, to manipulate the dimensions of it. So let's go in here into this family. And we already got these nodes, right? We already have this length and width and depth that we still have to play with, okay? So let's use that. So let's hit escape. Top left-hand corner where we have the family types of the column. Click there. Let's make this a little smaller here. And we're going to create visibility options and more customizing options here. So let's create a parameter at the bottom, new parameter. Instance, because we want different columns to have different properties with these thickenings. And on the name, let's just call it Thickened Slab. Okay. Let me think. Thickened Slab width. It's going to be a length, and let's put this under construction. Okay, so there's one. Now let's add another parameter, and this one's just going to be called Thickened Slab, which is also an instance parameter, but the type of parameter is going to be a yes/no. That means it's a checkbox, okay? And we're going to use that checkbox to assign the visibility. So over here, here we're going to group it under construction and hit OK. So we got thickened slab width, but now we need the depth, the height of that slab. So let's add a new one. Instance construction. Oops. Okay. And we can move depth down. And if you want to rename this, thickened slab, and then all you have is width and depth, that works too. So the default, we don't want it to be 0. We don't want this family to error out. Let's just say the default is 6. Ooh. Let's say the slab 6, width. So this will be 4 feet. And this one will be 6 inches. Okay. And hit apply. Okay. So now let's assign the depth first. This is part of diagnosing a family, whether it works. Thickened slab depth. Okay, let's load into the project. Overwrite. All right, now we can click on it, can zoom in here, and we can play with the thickened slab depth, and we can say 7 inches. Okay, it's updating. Great. And because it's a framing element, it doesn't matter if I put 10 inches here, the floor will cut what it needs. Okay, that's the beauty of using structural framing. So let's put this back at 7. All right, so the depth works. Let's go back into the family. Now let's play with the width. So this width we're going to associate with the thickened slab width. You see how the nodes turn to points. This width we're going to associate with the same one, thickened slab width. Okay, let's go into the project. Let's overwrite. Okay, now let's go ahead and select this family. And this footing is a 72 inch. So now we just have to match it. 72 inch. Okay, looking like something. So the family works well. We can close this column family. We're not going to save it because it lives in our project, and we're going to save out from our project. So now let's do this to all of our footings. So select the column, select all, SA, select all, and over here, thickened slab width is 72 inches. The depth is 7 inches. Everything's nicely updated. All right. But we got to do something about this excess concrete. We know that that's not reality. So we're going to create a type of family that I like to call like your skill saw, your saws, your tools. You know, think of actually going out on the site, right? You're seeing everything that people are using to build this building for you, where you can have the same kinds of tools in Revit. So we're going to create a void family that slices things off, the things that we don't need. So let's go back in to File, New Family. And we're going to choose a generic model, but we want this one right here, face-based. The reason why is because a face-based family cuts only the family it's hosted to. So let's use this one. Let's hit open. You can see that Revit automatically gives you a face here. So let's go to reference plane. So let's create a reference plane. Pick. Remember, this is your default here. So let's go with 3 feet. Place your dimensions. I know it's super redundant. Don't forget to equal out these guys. And now let's create a void. So let's create a void form, void extrusion. Pick your lines, make sure they're locked. Trim everything together. And finish. Now let's go to our right elevation. So it's this color, this void is this color because it's not cutting anything. So at this point, we can create our other reference plane, RP, pick, and let's say a foot, down. Let's place oh wait, let's bring this guy down from here. I want it to go to the reference plane. So let's move this reference plane up, and let's just say this should be 6 inches. There we go. Lock. So this void is still not cutting this host element, this host extrusion within the Revit family. So let's go to your geometry under your modify tab, geometry cut, select your solid first, your void second, and now it's cutting. All right. So far, so good. Now let's load this into the project. We're not going to close it yet. Load into project. You can see that it gives me this weird cursor, like nope. But when I hover over a face, I can place it. But this is not too user-friendly, right? I can't really see it because it's invisible. So let's add more, let's add some lines to that family so that we can actually see this thing in 3D. So we can help, so we can still work in 3D. So let's go back to the family. Let's close right, let's go back into the family. And this time, let's go to create. Let's create a model line. A model line exists in a 3D view. So you can choose whatever line you like. So hit pick, still want to lock. And let's pick these lines. And now let's trim everything together. Now load in a project. And now let's place this void family. So it's a generic model, family 10. And now let's drag and drop family 10. And let's just hover over these guys. See, there's our preview now. There's our 2D lines. So let's hover over this guy over there. So it's starting to slice it off. Now we need to add some more parameters to this for width and length, okay? So back into family. Let's play with this guy. This is going to be width. This one's going to be length. Load into project and close. We do not want to save. Overwrite. Now we got some options here. So let's see which one does it. That one does it, 10 feet. But it's cutting into the family. See that? It's cutting into my beam. So you can just bring this down with your keyboard, your arrows. You can hit top here and bring it down. And then after you have your line, let's align it, AL, destination, and you can tab until you get that line. Now play with your depth. We need it. We haven't added it, or I haven't added it. Let's go to our right elevation. Place this, and let's go ahead and name it depth. Let's go into family properties here, and we have everything we need. Depth, width, length, whatever order you guys prefer. Load into project. Nope, we're not saving yet. And let's override. Okay, now the depth can go to a foot. We're slicing everything off. So now let's select that void, right click, create similar. It takes on those properties that we set. So now let's hover over this. So what I did there, let's undo. We'll go here and create similar. I placed one here, but then over here, I want to rotate this thing. So you hover over and you hit spacebar on your keyboard, and it rotates. Okay, and okay. And we got this guy as well. All right. We know that this is dipping in, right? So what we can do is now we can grab this family, right click on it and hit select all in the entire project. And we're gonna click on the floor. So on your keyboard, hit control and click the floor. Now over here on your view control bar, let's hit isolate element. That's all we see are these voids. Now we can use our multiple alignment to bring them all back to the face of concrete. So let's hit align. On your options bar, hit multiple alignment. And let's hover over this face, which is your destination, and select, let's orbit under to make it easier, select each of these lines. Okay. Same thing on this side. Type in AL, select your destination, and select each line. Okay, now let's restore our view. Reset. And there you go. It's starting to look like something. Okay.